So, is there a difference between an FBI cover-up and no credible information? Well, that's certainly a possibility, because there's a difference between information, no information, and no credible information. I've been a practicing attorney, prosecutor, and defense attorney, as well as a law enforcement officer at the federal, state, and local level. And I'm here to tell you that police agencies or any type of law enforcement agencies will be getting an awful lot of information, and some of it is quite wacky. And so when that information is received, you cannot treat it as gospel, but it could be a lead. And so you don't want to disregard those leads, because one thing can lead to another, as strange as it may seem. But over time you have to make a decision. For example, if you're in a prosecutorial capacity, is about whether there is enough evidence to obtain a conviction, to be able to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And part of that is that you have to evaluate the information. So you could decide that, well, we have an awful lot of information about this, but we don't think it's credible. So this credibility idea is problematic, because in one way it's a subjective and an objective analysis about whether the information is good. And the problem with that is that if a law enforcement agency, like the FBI, is asked whether there were other women that were trafficked to other men in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, if they said no credible evidence or no credible information, they're not saying that there is not any information. So really what this is about is somebody is making a judgment call about whether that information is credible or not. So it's kind of like, and the problem is you cannot verify that. It's kind of like when the airlines cancel your flight. Sorry you missed your flight, but it was due to weather. And how are you going to verify that? Are you going to pull up the Weather Channel? Are you going to go behind the desk and figure out what the weather problem is? Certainly not. So in other words, the airlines is saying, trust me. And that's the challenge when a law enforcement agency is asked, do you have any information that so-and-so has molested other women and who they might be? And if they say no credible information, that could be just like their get out of jail free card, because that involves an assessment. And that could be potentially evasive. And that is in this context of a cover-up. So really what the United States Congress needs to do is to ask, do you have any information in their files which indicate that Jeffrey Epstein had shared these women that were molested with other men? Or women for that matter. Do you have any information that it was more than just him? And then if they say no credible information, that's not what I asked you. And I'm surprised that no one in Congress has picked up on this. No. I did not ask you whether there was credible information. I asked you whether there was any information. Because this goes back to this idea of leads. And so one thing may lead to another, and you can find the actual perpetrator. So this excuse about no credible information, I think, is kind of like a get out of jail free card. And so it does not answer the question, and that question remains unanswered. And I've seen other episodes of the congressional hearing in which they pushed further, and instead of answering the question, he went off on the deep end. So this is what I suggest Congress do, is that they have another hearing, and they have the senior officials in leadership at the FBI all come before the hearing and interview them separately so they cannot hear each other's testimony. And ask them that question: is there any information in the Epstein files that would indicate that someone other than Jeffrey Epstein had also engaged in these illegal sexual acts? And ask those questions, and don't take no credible information or no credible evidence as an answer. Now, of course, it's understandable about when you're conducting an investigation, you don't want to reveal everything. But at the same time as right now, the director has still not answered the question. And he's trying to use this idea of no credible evidence, which is an evaluation on their part. So it's kind of like holding, all the marbles. So we still don't know anything. And the thing is that there are other questions that Congress can have, but they need to realize, and somehow it boggles my mind that they have not, is that when someone answers no credible information or no credible evidence, that's a judgment and subject to interpretation. And subject to interpretation on the person that holds the goods, that holds the information. So until those things are answered, we still don't know if there's a cover-up or not, because we've got an FBI director with really questionable qualifications. So that must be, I don't know, just a political appointment, which makes him another politician. And somehow the Republican-led Senate committee approved this nomination for this director for reasons are yet to escape me. And perhaps the reason why they voted for Trump's nomination is because they were afraid of retaliation by the chosen one. Well, if that's the case, you need to grow a spine and either stand up or quit, because you're not doing the American people any service by worshiping the orange. That's just an idea I came up with. Until next time.